Good afternoon, everybody. It's a delight to be here with all you friends this afternoon, and especially with my close friend, Andrew Swinand, who's joining us for Mindful's first leadership webinar of this kind. We had a great response. There are a bunch of people here, and we're excited about the opportunity to discuss the issues of mindfulness practice with people who play leadership roles in large organizations. Andrew, for instance, leads a team of about 5,000 people at Publicis Creative Group and serves as CEO for, I think, 5 different creative brands, including Leo Burnett, Fallon, Saatchi & Saatchi, and some others. He's also, he's extraordinarily good company and a friend to Mindful. He is one of the founders of Abundant Venture Partners, who are one of Mindful's investors and our financial partner. Welcome, Andrew. So glad you could join us.
Oh, thank you. We're really excited to be here.
I thought it would be good to start maybe by just finding out about how you got started with a mindfulness practice. I know you're a serious practitioner and have been doing it for a while. What was going on in your life that first connected you to the practices of mindfulness and meditation?
Sure. So when I was 38 years old, I became president of a company called Starcom MediaVest Group. And Starcom MediaVest, we were the world's largest media agency. We were placing about 45 billion in advertising, about 1 of every 5 ads globally. And at the time, I was traveling about 500,000 miles a year. And we had grown from, 800 people to about 6,000. But, I'd also had broken 6 of my teeth, grinding them at night. And just, it was interesting. I liked the work, but the volume, the pressure, and the pace were starting to show up with physical manifestations. And, I think a lot of it was, you have this whole facade of everything's fine. And, but yet, underlying all of that is a stress. And I had joined something called YPO, which is Young Presidents Organization. And it's basically almost like a support group for young leaders. But they had set up some programs with different minds of the industry in terms of how to deal with stress and think about things. And we connected with a gentleman by the name of Jim Dethmer, who leads the Conscious Leadership Group. And, a lot of it was just kind of unpacking, your relationship to, one, attachment, what you were committed to, where you were spending your time. But I think secondarily, also just sharing tools and techniques to be more present, to, relieve stress and to increase focus. So, it began my own journey just with introducing me to these things and allowing me a venue to learn and grow with them.
And what was your experience then when you first started meditating? Did you experience quick relief? Was it a gradual thing? I mean, just how did that all feel to you?
It's interesting for me, and it's relevant to our discussion. For me, the biggest aha was actually the practice of presency. And what I had found was...
You mean being present in the moment?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're constantly in this triggered state. And, thinking about the 100 things you need to do, you have to do. And for me, the idea of practicing presency and being in the moment, of being able to check yourself and where you are now, coupled with meditation and just practicing breath control and calming your mind, had a transformational impact. And with that, I think, again, I feel like the meditation practice helps with presencing and helps with stress control. But again, the ongoing benefit for me is much more checking yourself throughout the day, and basically being able to identify when you're in a triggered state and being able to step back and, really, where am I now? Is there any real threat here now? And what am I really focused on? So I think, it's, for me, it's a much more, mindfulness is really part of a holistic commitment to movement, mindfulness, and meditation. And I see the three being balanced just in terms of my own practice.
And so, parse that out for us. Movement, mindfulness, and meditation. What do those three words mean in your practice?
So I think, from a movement standpoint, the physical benefit of just doing yoga, stretching, moving your body, and being deliberate about it.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of us, we work in jobs where you sit all day. So, I find just in terms of generally when I exercise, a lot of it I think is meditative. I don't so much enjoy going to gyms as there was an article that was once written, but I run on a treadmill with a backpack with the lights off, and it's both physical and mental exercise.
Literally, you run on a
I
treadmill in the dark with a backpack.
I do.
Okay.
But I had read, just the Dalai Lama, like part of his meditation practice is walking on the treadmill, and again, it's the physical and mental release that comes with it. For me, a lot of the mindfulness practice is, again, this idea of being present, but also, one of the things I've learned is this idea of what I talk about, taking advantage of God's gifts. And I think it was a paradigm shift for me again, in that I think as you go through your life, so many things you think of as small annoyances are actually mental breaks. And, you think about, I'm in line at Starbucks and I'm pissed off because there's a line. So I take out my phone to check my email to distract, and the idea was, what are all the places where you are forced to pause? Mm-hmm. And as opposed to, waiting for the plane to take off and I can't take out my phone and I'm forced to sit still. Think about the gift that brings in what is an otherwise incredibly busy life, and accepting that as a gift and basically taking advantage of it. And then I guess kind of the third axis is in meditation, just, if you're familiar with the work of Dr. Richie Davidson and neuroplasticity, just how, training your mind to be more present, to be more calm, and having that ability to practice breath control and create those moments of presencing when they become available.
Do you meditate every day, usually?
I do.
And do you have a standard length? I mean, are you?
I am not a sit for 2 hours because I don't have the time. But what I generally do is, when I wake up in the morning, first thing, and do 15 minutes to a half hour, and right before bed, 15 minutes to a half hour. And then the rest of my practice is what I think about as snackable moments. So one of the things that was a little aside that was, again, a transformational insight for me. I'm on the board of the American Heart Association, and they had a presentation from the Johnson & Johnson Leadership Institute. And they had brought in this doctor, and they had worked with leaders and athletes on the idea of increasing performance. And the case study he shared was one where they had worked with Serena Williams. And basically the idea is as you play tennis, over the course of the match, you become tired and your performance declines.
Mhm.
And what they had said was that they talked about it as the 6 seconds in between. And the idea behind it is in between serves, you have about 6 seconds of rest. And they worked with her on presencing, breath control, and moments of meditation for the 6 seconds in between.
Mhm.
And what they found was lower heart rate, lower stress, better, stamina, better endurance. And for me, kind of the application of that was, what are my 6 seconds in between, and how do you think about not just I'm going to sit and meditate for an hour and that's my mindful moment, but what are all the 6 seconds in between where I can actually find moments of pause to practice breath control, lower my blood pressure, be more calm and be more present. Um, so again, I have better endurance, longevity, and stamina.
Mhm.
And again, I think it's linked back to this idea of the world offer you natural gifts. Um, you discover your 6 seconds, I think, quite organically. And again, coming back to the research of Dr. Davidson, he had basically found that meditation was cumulative. And the idea is it's much like exercise. It's not that I need to run 8 hours in one day. The more I move, the more steps you take, the more and the greater the impact. So, again, for me, for my own personal schedule, I think about how do I find those moments, and how do I both celebrate and benefit from the cumulative impact.
In a way, a feeling of being open to those moments, a feeling of being ready for those
Yes,
moments.
and
Yeah,
being on the lookout for them.
yeah, right.
One of the other things I've done too is just, I talk about it as 5 beautiful things, but like if you're at a red light, taking a minute and saying, what are 5 beautiful things that are around me that if I was go, 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 rush, 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 I would miss.
Yeah,
Um, and again, for someone who works in a creative profession, just, the things you discover, and again, that you would just rush by, the old woman's window box on the second floor that, she's tended beautifully, and you drive by it every day, but you've never seen it. Um, so again, I both look for and seek ways to just practice presency.
yeah. I use that exercise too, and I find it is particularly rich in places like the airport, where you're accustomed to not, you're once not really tuned into beauty, or I'm not when I'm in the airport, and it can be particularly enriching.
And I think what's amazing to me too is it's just again all the the things that have been designed, and again, like working in marketing and advertising, like people have spent time putting artwork in the airport that people walk by blindly, or and it's
Right.
I love it as an exercise. So
Yeah, yeah. Um, do you mind me asking if you're religious? You referred to gifts, to God's gifts. Did you mean that in a religious way, or just sort of as a general statement that?
I am. It was interesting in terms of my own uh, journey. I was raised Catholic, and evolved to going to the Episcopal Church.
Mhm.
My wife is actually from Thailand, is Buddhist, so generally we'll go to Buddhist temple on Sunday.
Uh-huh.
But it's interesting. I would still classify myself as a Christian.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't see the two in conflict. I actually see them very much synergistically, in that the idea of love and appreciation, I think, is a universal.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess if I had to pinpoint it, I would consider myself more spiritual than religious.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's a big part of who I am. So,
Yeah. I should say to everybody, we're happy to pick up a question at any point if it seems relevant to where we're at in the conversation. And you can, at the bottom of your screen, there's actually a Q&A box. I see a couple of people have discovered it. And those questions will then be forwarded on to us. And you'll see me checking over here once in a while to see if we have some questions. We'll try to get to those as they come. So, traditionally the workplaces, and particularly the executive suite in the workplace, is a bastion of intensity and certainty and often aggression. And in a mindfulness practice, a meditation practice is usually perceived to cultivate the opposite sort of qualities in people. Tell me about being a meditator, with and leading thousands of people, and one assumes encountering the usual situations in business that can include, antagonisms, confrontation, negotiation. How does mindfulness inform your work as an executive leading a great big company?
for me, I believe it or not, see it quite the opposite. And it's interesting. I mean, our core product is creativity. So I mean, our people come to us with problems and say, "Can you use creativity to help me solve them?" So for me, we actually have been training and encouraging mindfulness across all of our employees. And for me, the reason is, there was a study where basically they found that people have on average about 70,000 thoughts a day. They were saying about 80% of them are the same thoughts you had the day before, because you're in this triggered state of, if only I'd made that free throw in 8th grade, my whole life would have been different. But if our whole thing is coming up with new ideas for clients, and 80% of our thoughts are the same ones we had the day before, we're probably not that good at our jobs. And you think about how much of work and life is triggering and leads to triggering behavior. For me, the idea of presencing and how do you actually let go of that and be able to focus and concentrate, I feel like mindfulness is a secret unlock for innovation and creativity, because it allows you to be in the moment and focus on the problem. Secondarily, um, I think about the leadership not so much from a standpoint of aggression, or confrontation, but of positive energy and wind in the sails. And if I think about my core job, it's how do I energize and focus the people who work for me? And the medium I have to do that is the energy I bring to the problem and the energy I bring to the situation. Um, but for me as a leader, if I show up stressed and angry, I'm probably limiting creativity. I'm probably limiting the team's ability to innovate. So again, I think from a leadership perspective, it's almost a mandatory to have some sort of practice to maintain energy. Um, and I've met people who try to, I think, lead from a culture of fear. You might get a result, but they're not the best result. Um, and lastly, I also, in the work with Jim Jeffmer and conscious leadership, a lot of it was uh, issue clearing, speaking unarguable truths, and all of these things I think are techniques that help you deal more effectively with conflict, and also not to have conflict elevate to story and the irrational, but to focus on approaching conflict from a place of curiosity and what can you learn, um, as opposed to defensiveness and how do you dig in. So, my experience very much, Brian, has been that they're incredibly complementary and incredibly linked, um, and make you more effective as a leader, especially if you're, dealing with a culture where creativity and innovation are at a premium.
Are there resources to cultivate mindfulness practices in your colleagues across your organization?
I mean, we have, as are working and have made effort to take a lot of the content from mindful.org and deploy it. So I think there's an education component.
Yeah.
We actually required all of our leaders to work on going through a program in conscious leadership. Um, and again, we have a kind of a internal app intranet called Marcel, but working to get mindful content hosted on it, deployed on it, and working to develop specific practices. So the idea behind it is, if it be trouble sleeping, stress, anxiety, that basically people can both educate themselves on techniques to deal with it, but two, learn practices, meditate, to basically help with presency. And then lastly, we've worked extensively with Life XT, like cross training in terms of coaching, senior executives in terms of the practices of movement, mindfulness, and meditation and stress management. And again, for me, I think, the efficiency and the efficacy of having leaders who can show up and be present, um, it's been an incredibly valuable and a creative investment, because it allows you to be more effective and functional as a leadership team.
For those who don't know, Life XT is Mindful's corporate training product. Um, did you encounter, as sort of, as your interest in mindfulness became more obvious, I suppose, to your colleagues, and as you began cultivating it across the organization, did you ever encounter any resistance?
Yes, it's interesting. We had when I had started, we had instituted this thing called Tiny Pulse, and basically it takes the pulse of the company every week or two. But as part of it, you get anonymous feedback. And what I've learned is that no matter what you do as a leader, there's a bell-shaped curve. So 10% love, 60, 70% in the middle, and 10% hate. When we had started bringing mindfulness to the organization, we found, 30% of the organization was, "This is great, thank you." 60% was, cautiously optimistic, but I'll participate and see what happens.
Yeah.
And then 10%, what is this Eastern bullshit religion doing in the workplace?
Right. Gotcha. Um, is
I've
there a
also
difference?
been aside on that too. I've also had someone say to me, if 10% of the people don't hate it, it's probably not that different. So.
Yeah, no, I think, well, and it's true, as you know, it's true for the work we put out in the world as well. You'll get, you could get hate mail about anything
Yeah.
that goes out into the world at large.
I had shut down the office between Christmas and New Year's. I got 6 emails basically of people complaining about it. And I mean, it's like, what's not to like? I don't know, but so.
We have a question about whether there's a difference in your workplace wellness programs for executives and those of other workers. Do you have a?
I think no. I think that so I mean the things we do, because we've invested in the platform and the content, is something that's available to all employees. Um, I do, when we do invest in coaching, it's generally more senior at the executive level. Um, but again, we have offered training programs and, brought in leaders from Life XT to present in open houses and to the company. So the thinking is available. I guess, at the executive level, there just might be a little bit more investment in terms of the support.
Sure. Here's a good question someone asked, how do you start when you've lived your whole life at a fast pace? And I can imagine that being a pretty vexing question for a person that's accustomed super high pace, super productive person, in a fast paced work environment. How do you start?
For me, I think about it quite literally as opening the gift. So it's the gift of knowledge. And what I think is interesting about it is, people put the gift on the table, but again, in the spirit of mindfulness, people walk by it, and they never take the time to unwrap the gift. Um, what I found for myself is once I was given the gift, um, I think if you look at anything power of habit, you start small. You don't sit down and say, well, I need to do an hour of meditation.
Right.
Um, and again, for me in dealing with, employees and coworkers, this is where I come back down to the idea of just snackable moments. It's a really easy way to start, so as opposed to sitting in the shower and thinking about your day and how rushed you are, think about the fact that like we live in a world where you can like stand under hot running water every day, and what a joy that is. And there's a 3-minute meditation. So for me, it was, it was much less, am I doing this right? Am I sitting in the right position? Is it, what school or technique am I deploying? And much more about how do you just practice gratitude, presencing, and moments of appreciation. And again, I found it like many other things. Once you take the first step, the next 10 are much easier. Um, but I guess if I was going to sum it, Brian, I would be, I set the bar low. Uh,
Great. Yeah, I mean, for sure, it was starting out. It, so why do the longer sit at all? Your 15 or 20 minutes, whatever you said, that you start the day with. Is that valuable?
it is, and I think part of it is uh, I think about it as setting intentions for the day, and then I also think about it in the evening as kind of turning off.
Mhm,
So it has a specific role.
mhm.
Um, and oftentimes in the morning I'll incorporate yoga or stretching with it as well. But again, it's the idea of uh, starting the day with intention and focus.
Is it ever, are you ever reluctant to sit down
Oh,
and
there's
meditate?
days. I mean, you have there's days when things don't work out.
Yeah, sure. I guess
Yeah.
what I mean is, you ever think to yourself, I would just rather watch a video or read a book or, whatever.
Um, I'll be honest, I'm not a big TV watcher, and I never
Uh-huh.
have been. Um, so for me, I don't have the lure of TV as a distraction. Um,
You probably have the lure of something as a distraction, or not.
I for me, I enjoy working in the garden. I enjoy spending my time with my family, but I don't. Uh, as I think about, to your comment on like getting ready for bed, I don't. I very much look forward to the moment of calm,
Mhm.
as opposed to turning on the TV. Or honestly, I used to read before bed, and I don't anymore.
Mhm.
Um, but
Well,
I like the idea of clearing my mind.
yeah.
And again, to your comment on your mind is racing, 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 filling it with new thoughts. Um, I, I like I like the idea of just taking the moment of pause and basically clearing and being present.
As a person who supports mindfulness practices for his colleagues in the workplace, you mentioned creativity as a as enhanced creativity as a benefit of mindfulness practice. Are there other specific qualities that you think are valuable in the workplace that rest on a foundation of mindfulness?
Absolutely. I mean, the whole platform I have across the creative agencies is to focus on creativity and kindness. And again, I think mindfulness is central. But again, I think if people are walking around in a triggered state, um, you know, it's very hard for you to be open to new ideas, to approach things from a place of curiosity, and again, productively deal with conflict. And again, the thing I think is interesting is if you think about the very definition of creative concepting, it's presenting new ideas, debating them, vetting them. If you're defensive, if you're not open to feedback, if you're not open to evolution, you're not going to get to a good place. But in the same respect, if you don't feel like it's a safe environment, if you don't feel like it's a kind environment, you're not going to share your ideas and take the leap.
Right.
So for me, the idea of creativity and kindness are inextricably linked. And you need to cultivate an environment where um, people have the headspace to come up with new ideas, but also the safe space to share them, and also the acceptance that others are going to input on those ideas, sometimes critically, to build them.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think, kind of coming back to, some of the conscious leadership principles, it's approaching from the world from a place of curiosity and the idea of feedback as a gift. And again, the paradigm shift is someone's giving me feedback and therefore they're right. I have to prove them wrong because I need to be right, as opposed to, okay, Bryan loves and cares about me enough that he's willing to risk our relationship to share his input. He's willing to devote his time to actually consider it. And he believes and trusts me enough that I'm going to be open to it. And I'm mature enough that he's going to share it. And that's a gift. Because if Bryan really didn't give a damn, he would say nothing. Because basically he no longer cares about the relationship, the idea, or better outcomes. So if your colleague or coworker is willing to invest that trust in you, how do you return the gift? By basically being open to it, and approaching it from a place of curiosity and what can I learn?
You're implying, I think, in what you just said, that that mindfulness practice can support or enhance our capacity for kindness.
I 100% believe that to be the case.
How does that work?
If you're triggered, stressed, and on edge, where you're loaded for bear and ready to explode at the next person who comes in, hey Bryan, could I talk to you about that storyboard? Get the hell out. I don't have time for that.
Yeah, I'm
You gotta
so
get
tired of that project, right?
Yeah,
I'm sick of talking about that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, I feel like it's an unlock for culture and especially for cultures of innovation and creativity.
Yeah. Yeah. We had another question, just sort of how's your mindfulness practice helped you navigate the world of change, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity?
So, again, I think to the coming back to the point of curiosity,
Yeah.
it just creates an openness and a space for you to accept change and be open to different outcomes. Um, and I think, for my own story, when I was younger, I had a lot more preconceptions of success, um, and I think too, I was a lot more tied to outcomes being linked to identity.
Hmm.
And the story I tell about this, I'm president of Starcom MediaVest Group. I have 6,000 people. You're placing billions of dollars. I left to start Abundant. I had no income, no clients, no employees, and no employment. I
Hmm.
wasn't a better or worse person the day before or the day after. And I think a lot of it is like, how do you step back and not attach to what you had originally thought, basically being the only outcome, and allow that openness that good things will still come. And again, I think for me, being mindful removes you from that trigger defensive state and allows you to be open to say, okay, let me see where this leads and let me see what the possibilities are. Or, in the case of, if you are attacked, to say, that's not me, that's not about me, that's in some respect about them,
Yeah.
in their anger trigger state. And again, you don't know what went on in that individual's day, but if it caused an overreaction, it actually had nothing to do with me.
Right.
Um,
Don't name any names, but do you ever deal with a client who's just kind of an angry, driving, pushing,
yes.
abrasive? You do, really? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And, and how does that, how does the mindfulness culture or the mindful culture of your organization absorb that? I mean, how do you deal with, a client who's just kind of that?
For me, I think one, the idea of story and that the fact that it's like none of their anger has to do with you. Um, and again, creating that distance, and even if they come out and say, this work is crap and your team is crap, um, I don't think that it's allowing that anger to land.
Yeah.
And again, it's not to say you don't acknowledge it and are unaware of it, but their overreaction and anger isn't related to you. It's being driven. The second thing I think is and critically important is this idea of responsibility,
Hmm.
which is kind of a one of the first principles with conscious leadership. One of the examples I always give is, as an agency, you have a client come in and say, I want you to stay up all night rewriting all this work. So, if you're in a point of victim, it's this client made me stay up and rewrite all the work. But the reality is, like, you could choose not to. You could take that and say, you know what, I'm sorry, we can't do that tonight. I have other plans. Um, you could choose to resign the client. You could choose to, tell them to piss off. Like, you have infinite choice there. But the idea is, um, I want the account, I want the money, I want the recognition, I want to do the good work. I'm going to choose to stay up all night and redo the work because I care, because I'm committed, and because I want to. And for me, I think it's another critical component of responsibility, presencing, and ownership, because I'm now no longer working from a position of being a victim or at the effect of. I'm working from a position of victor and basically owning the outcomes. And I'm working all night because I'm choosing to,
Yeah.
because I want and care about this. So again, for me, and I know this is nuanced, um, it's one, recognizing that people's anger is an effect of their own emotional state, and not yours. And then two, owning the choices you make in response as your own decisions, for dealing with and responding to the situation, and not being at the effect of.
Yeah. Well, there is something that's a very interesting perspective, because there is something very fundamentally pro responsibility about meditation practice or mindfulness practice. When you take responsibility for your own experience by training your mind to address each moment in a fresh way, that there is something, that's basically about personal responsibility, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think, hopefully this came through in my thoughts, but again, the idea is you're taking personal responsibility for your own way of being and the way how you respond to the world at that time.
Yeah.
And again, as a leader of a large organization, to my earlier comment on 10% is going to hate everything you do.
Yeah, sure.
You get this was the worst decision ever. Why would you do that? You can't be paralyzed to make decisions, and you need to own the decisions you make. But again, I find mindfulness, it allows you to be present on, how did I make a values-based decision? How did I make the best decision with the knowledge I had, and being at peace with the outcome, even if people think it was the worst decision ever. Um, and again, being in a place where you're accepting responsibility, and obviously you want to do well, but also not being so attached to the outcome that you're overweighting it,
Mm-hmm.
that it's, if things don't go the way you wanted them to, world is over, and things are
Yeah.
terrible.
That pertains to a question that came through about, how to deal with managers or supervisors who don't give regular feedback. And I can hear part of what you're saying is that, as we become less invested in one, in the pep talk, once we become less invested in some kind of image of how success is constituted, then we can sincerely ask for negative feedback without experiencing that trigger emotion that sends all kinds of messages out around us that we don't want that feedback.
Yep.
And I think that openness cultivated, at any level of an organization, helps lubricate the flow of important information about about our collaborations, about our own responsibilities, about our performance, that can make us all better. But it kind of grows out of the practice, doesn't it, in that respect?
Yep, absolutely. Well, and I think part of it too is, again, in placing the world from approaching the world from a place of curiosity.
Yeah.
To the question of how do you deal with managers who don't provide feedback. For me, one of the things I do is I literally end every meeting with people who work for me asking, what could I do different or better? What could I do to better support you? If I did one thing differently, how would it? What would the outcome be for you, and what would that one thing be?
Yeah.
But I think it's asking for it, and again, both from a place of sincerity and acceptance.
Well, in that spirit, what have I not asked, or how have I not conducted how have I not addressed this conversation in an ideal way? What would you like to talk about that we haven't covered? Or
I think the other kind of relevant thing on it is the fact that it is truly a practice. Oftentimes, as I'm sure if I play this back, it's like, wow, you have it locked in, and as a practice, it's not like you don't have days where you're churning your gut. It's not like you don't have moments where you're triggered.
yeah.
Or you have that bad client, you're just pissed off and angry. So again, I think one of the things I really want to emphasize is, as a practice, it means you are making mistakes and constantly working at it, but it's the journey and the practice that basically reaps the benefit.
Yeah.
Um, you
And
know,
I
I,
find,
I,
not
I have
only
moments
do I
where I'm
never
on my
get,
phone.
pardon me?
I have moments where I'm on my phone and, trying to multitask and do 100 things. And, you know, uh, but I think it's constantly working to try to limit that as much as possible. And I honestly, too, I think with COVID, that's been even harder. Um, where you're stationary in one place all day with the computer and the phone in front of you. So,
Yeah, yeah. I find it's both, one never gets, no, one's never perfect. One doesn't arrive with perfect awareness, perfect enlightenment, or whatever you want to call it. But by the same token, the practices of mindfulness are sort of fathomless. There's no limit to the benefits in my experience, as my lifetime of practice has gone on. I I find new frontiers in my own awareness, new frontiers in my own orientation to the world, and so it has never. It just gets more and more interesting.
yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Always
Mhm.
evolving. So,
Always evolving. Anything else? Anything you want to ask me?
are there other questions or, are we,
I was going to give you the permission to wrap up with a few minutes left in the hour, and I think we've answered. Well, do you have any suggestions for people who have a mindfulness practice and would like to introduce it to their workplace? And let me encourage, since Andrew's willing to hang around for another 10 minutes or so, if you have a question that you haven't asked, please throw it in there now. But that's a good question. If you're in a company that doesn't have an awareness of this whole mindfulness thing, how would you introduce that to the workplace as just as a person who works there?
I think, I mean, if you're a leader, I think directly. If you're an employee, the thing I would just talk about it is organically. One of the things I found is when I first started talking about it, we had 30, 40 employees immediately come forward saying they created an employee resource group called Conscious Minds. Um, but I actually believe it's a big enough idea and movement that you would get critical mass, and find like-minded people. But for me as a leader, um, my point of view is I think it's a personal responsibility to bring it to the organization.
Yeah.
Um, Again, like, why would you not put the gift on the table, um, if you have the ability to give it? So,
Yeah. And I meet people virtually every day who started a meditation group at work, and they set aside a 15 or a 20-minute period where a group meets in a conference room just to sit together, keeping it very secular, very general, very, in a sort of easily digestible mindfulness level. And, groups grow.
yep, yep.
Um, how long have you been meditating?
I guess about 15 years, I guess. Yeah.
And you talked about breath control as an aspect of your practice early on in the conversation. Do you want to explain what in your practice that means?
So I think there's two things. I mean, one, I think in the moment, a simple 4x4 breath. Um, but
What does that mean, a 4x4 breath?
so it's interesting. So I was in the army, and it's interesting. One of the things they actually teach special ops is breath control as a way to lower your heart rate, reduce your anxiety, and provide focus. But it's literally breathing in 4 count, holding breath 4 count, exhaling 4 count 4 times,
Mhm.
and immediately lowers your heart rate, lowers your blood pressure. But I found it again a great technique when you realized you're triggered, just to recenter and refocus. And then, for me, oftentimes in meditation, I really just focus on breathing, um, focusing on the point of inhale and when it ends, focusing on the point of exhale and when it ends.
Yeah.
But the focus on breath.
Are there mindfulness practices that you've integrated into the routines of your company? For instance, in meetings, do you ever have a mindful moment, or is there any of that kind of standard ritual in your organization?
At Abundant, we do start every meeting with a mindful moment and moment of pause. And the idea is allow people to show up. So it's take a minute, do a 4x4 breath. If there's that one email you want to get out, get it done, but take a minute to allow yourself to show up. More broadly at the leadership level, I guess the biggest thing I do is gratitude. During meetings, basically allowing time for people to share thanks and gratitude.
Yeah.
And again, I see it as part of the practice, but again, encouraging people to, look for and share appreciation.
Yeah. Cool. Um, the recording of this webinar will be available. If not immediately after we close, it'll be available very soon at mindful.org, and it'll be available over the long term, so you can watch it again, share it with your colleagues, whatever you like. We did have a question come up a couple of times about what advice would one give to somebody who wants to work in the health or mindfulness industry. I suppose that maybe is for me, huh?
Yeah, it's probably better for you than for me.
And I don't know. I think what I would do is focus on my practice and probably get trained as a meditation teacher of some kind, because so much of our product, whatever realm we work in wellness or mindfulness or health, our products end up being instructive one way or the other. And so a fundamental grounding as a teacher of meditation or mindfulness is a great place to start. It's a bit like, getting an undergraduate degree in your discipline, whatever it is, and a foundation to build off of. I would also advise anybody considering it, it's great fun. It's really been a wonderful privilege in my life. But it also means that you're going to end up addressing the products of wellness, the products of mindfulness, the products of meditation as products. And that requires a certain shifting of perspective, I think, from our experience as practitioners, which is both interesting and sometimes challenging.
Yeah.
We're getting a lot of questions. How long after you started meditating did you notice real benefits?
Immediately. I mean, I think, again, for me, it's immediate effect because I think it was so holistic in terms of my view of the world and basically what I did. Mm-hmm. So.
Do you have a sense, we had a question from a person who works with teenagers and is wondering, what are the opportunities or complexities of bringing mindfulness practices into schools or introducing them to the teenage population?
I have no experience with that directly.
You raised teenagers, though.
I did. The thing for me, which the way I approached it with my own children is again giving them the gift. So not forcing it.
Yeah.
But basically offering this as a way to focus.
Yeah.
I think I had shared with you my my son is looking to be a jazz pianist, but as you deal with pre-stage jitters, just, similar techniques of breath control. But again, I think it's making them aware, but then allowing them to pick it up at their own pace.
Yeah, and there's a responsibility in there too, which you, I think, are fulfilling in a beautiful way, which is, I was drawn to people who meditated because I sensed they had a quality of attention, they had a perspective that I wanted to share. I was drawn to them because the value of their practice was visible in how they conducted themselves. And they were also open enough to say, well, I have this practice and it's important to me. I'd just like to thank you for sharing with us and with our audience your practice, your perspective, your awareness, and with all the people that you've encountered over the years in your leadership positions. It's a great gift.
Great fun. Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Bryan, and thank you.
Okay.
All right,
Thanks.
take care.
Thanks all. Yeah, thank you all. Great to have you as friends, and don't hesitate to drop a line. My email is brian.welch@mindful.org. Easy enough to remember, and I'll try to get back to you quickly. Thanks again, Andrew. Great to see you.
All right, thank you. Be well.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.